Last year at this time, we had the digital leaders of both the RNC and the DNC anticipate what they were going to be doing in the next cycle. So one of the things we want to do here is ask each of them for an after-action report. I have with me here Patrick Stevenson, who is is now leading the Chief Mobilization Officer at the DNC, had been the Donor Mobilization Officer, and before that, Principal Strategist at Blue State Digital, and also the Director of State Digital Programs for Hillary for America. True, we're seeing in the field, and that's one of the things that I want to talk to Patrick about. Of work that they did. Thank you for coming. I wanted to start by asking, going into this cycle, what's the key challenge for the DNC different from the challenge the RNC had?
It's a great question. I think, I'm not breaking any news here, telling people that headed in after the 2016 cycle, that we had a bit of a trust problem. We got a lot of negative news. That's an editorial comment.
Yours officially trust deficit. Hacking episode created a trust deficit.
Generally speaking, that our 2018 strategy is our supporters are really smart. You see Joe. Well, politics was very like who'd you vote? 2017, who state legislature candidate the country, which like the state chamber. Democratic supporters so sophisticated and making an impact. DNC money leading program then, and our supporters never really, we test all these things. You send out communications, you see what works, what doesn't. The communications that worked in 2014 were mostly just like, hey, this wants you to do this thing. Hey, 2018, the DNC doing network team. We sent
have that. We the first
about the working at the state level on a whim. Then it was
so you work.
It hasn't heard that.
Within it changed so much.
There's a donate, and they felt bought in and fought invested. A thing I should say about this too, and just talking about this from a fundraising perspective, is this is always the approach political organizations have used for high dollar donors. When you're trying to convince someone to give you a maximum donation. It is not something people have traditionally applied to smaller dollar donors.
I think beforehand that really popped for me. This idea that now, as a component of this small donation grassroots trend that we've seen digital help activate, part of it is treating the small donors like they're big donors.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about how you execute on that. Again, how does this come out in real messaging?
Yeah, that's a great question. From a fundraising perspective, I mean, the easiest place to start is telling people what they're investing in, rather than just like, give us $5 because it'll support Democrats and Democrats will win. It's more just establishing, going from point A to point B to point C. Like, you need that point B of like, and this is how it's going to happen. Two is, this is great you have this up there. We had a really exciting partnership with Mobilize America, which is after 2017 or 2016, a lot of very interesting and exciting new tech platforms started emerging. I think Toby Falscraft, who's here, might talk about some of them later. but there's lots of people started putting out technology, and you know, Mobilize America is basically just a tool where you can just go type in your zip code and it'll kick you out a bunch of volunteer opportunities in your community. One of the things that we can do at the DNC, and like a major role we can play, is we are able to kind of put our stamp on the tools and platforms we like and start giving them lots of traffic, giving them lots of buy-in, working with our state parties to actually drive people. So this is, you see right here, this is an email. The fact that this is an email is pretty cool, where we were able to send this out to our whole list, target people based on their location, and then kick them out embedded in the email a direct opportunity to go volunteer. And what that is too is it's just giving people an opportunity to make an impact on their community, where we are taking on more the role of facilitator of citizen involvement or anything. And I think that characterized a lot of our approach in terms of just, it's less telling people how to help us do the thing and more empowering supporters to do the thing themselves.
That was one of the things that last year when Caitlin was here, and again, she had sort of signaled to us early on that they were seeing an unprecedented level of enthusiasm, the grassroots, for the coming election. And one of the real challenges is, and she said it at the time, was when you have that many people, that many potential volunteers, how do you activate, how do you do this in an orderly way? When you have an unprecedented level of enthusiasm in the field, how do you direct it? What were some of the things that you did this cycle to manage that wave of enthusiasm?
Yeah, our partnership with Mobilize is a big one. I'll just give an anecdote about this because I'm a liberal 30-something. I have a lot of friends that live in Brooklyn. And come the weekend before the election, they all wanted to do something. They're like, all right, it's time. I got to go out there and I'm going to make an impact. Using Mobilize, we were able to connect them to Max Rose, the congressman running in South Brooklyn and Staten Island. They, using our Mobilize platform and other, connecting people with volunteer opportunities, they knocked every single door in their GOTV universe the weekend before the election, which is, having worked in field a long time, that doesn't happen in one weekend. So giving people a platform where you're able to post volunteer opportunities and then people an opportunity to just actually go volunteer was pretty effective. Another thing we had a lot of success with this cycle was offering people the opportunity to split fundraise, essentially. So Act Blue, which is the donation platform of record for every Democratic campaign and organization at this point, they will let you you go to make a $10 donation, and then 5 of it can go to one organization, 5 of it can go to another organization. You can also split that any number of ways. We did a lot of this with our Senate campaigns and found that to be quite effective. We raised about $2.8 million directly for our Senate campaigns from grassroots supporters this cycle, which is very exciting. But people have enthusiasm. They don't really know what to do. So a thing we can do to tell people is hey, John Tester in Montana actually, the marginal value of a $25 contribution to John Tester in Montana is actually really high, and we would like to ask you to do that now. And that was a very effective way for us.
So show your work, give them the tools to activate themselves. A lot of these are following some of the same themes that we're already seeing, say, in brand marketing, this idea of this consumer-centric approach to branding. In some sense, we're seeing this also in politics, that both the moment that we're in, but also the digital tools that allow this dispersion of empowerment to happen is bringing all that down into the grassroots. That seems to be one of the key themes here, is not just let them be a part of something big, but actually they need to feel like you're showing your work, they're seeing exactly what you're doing with their effort, but you're also giving them the tools to actually do something.
Yes.
As a part of this. Another piece of this was mobile. And texting. Tell me a little bit about how I know that in talking to you, you were finding some interesting impacts from this texting trend, which was really important in this cycle. It became, and we're going to hear more about this later, but for you guys, you found something in particular that was fascinating in the way that you were using texting.
Yeah, so we have two, we partnered with Hustle, which is another emerging democratic technology platform this past cycle. We used Hustle to do anything from get out the vote texting, taking universes of people in key districts and states, and then just telling them where their polling place location was, or when the election was. I think the key, our key number that I'd point to is in 2017 we had that Alabama Senate election, and Democrats have not done a ton of organizing in Alabama historically. So there's a lot of people in Alabama who are potential Democratic voters, but our party is just not historically organized Alabama. And also it's a special election, so you don't have everyone primed to go vote on. I think that election was December 7th or something. People don't know, oh, I have to go vote on December 7th or whatever. So we cut universes of mostly eligible but not active African American voters in Alabama, and doing some testing, we found that texting them twice before the election with their polling place information increased turnout in that community by 0.6%, which doesn't sound like a lot maybe, but when you're talking about A, a close election, and B, people in our field drives themselves crazy over anything that can produce any type of turnout, and the fact that we were able to statistically prove that texting gets people out to the polls, I think especially in under-organized communities and in special elections, is a really promising application of this.
You were also seeing an impact on fundraising,
yes,
too, with text, an unexpected piece that had to do with, since we're often thinking about texting as something that's targeting younger voters who want to be digital. You tell us a little bit about what you were seeing in terms of where they were giving as a result of the texting.
So an exciting part of our team is we aren't just the digital team anymore. We think that's a bit outmoded at this point. So I oversee our digital operation, such as it is, and also our traditional direct marketing program, which is mail, telemarketing, all that good stuff. So in January of this year, we ran a test where we took half the people that got a direct mail piece asking people to renew their contribution. We sent half of that universe a text that was just, hey, check your mail, essentially. Check your mail for a letter from us. And normally when people think about texting, and the way that I've heard people talk about it is you're trying to convert on the channel that you're interacting with the person on. So the thing you're looking for is, hey, did texting people to renew their contribution in early 2018, did they click the link that you texted them and then do it? And we found during this process that not many people clicked the link in the text message and renewed it, but we found a 21% increase in dollars per person who received the mailing from people that got the text message. So essentially the user flow there is someone like my grandmother who was a very loyal DNC donor. My grandmother doesn't text, but she receives text messages. So you just see it. You're like, oh yeah, I should go return the check. And we saw that just using SMS as a reminder strategy to take action on other channels was remarkably effective.
That's a wild connection between the two.
Yeah.
What didn't work? What underperformed this cycle for you?
Two things that come to mind. I mentioned our success with Senate split fundraising. We raised $2.8 million there. So of course, being aggressive and innovative fundraising strategists, we're like, well, we're going to apply this to the House. And we also determined in our analysis, people are 6 times more likely to give locally. So, for example, if you're asking someone in New York to donate to John Tester's campaign, a person in Montana is 6 times more likely to donate to John Tester's campaign than a person in New York. So using all of these applications, we're going to give people individual slates of House candidates to support. So if you live in Virginia, we're going to give you a list of Abigail Scanberger, Jennifer Wexton, and you can split a contribution between all those. This took a lot of work, right? You have to set up 50 different donate pages. You have to do all the work to approve your candidate slates, which is a bit of a political task. So, we finally do all this work. We send it out, and we raised about $500 per candidate. Yeah, $500 is, from local grassroots donors, it's fine, but it was not worth to put in. And also, House candidates didn't really have a problem raising grassroots money this cycle because of what we're mentioning. We didn't necessarily need to spend all that time, effort, and energy connecting people to their local candidates.
We have time for questions from the audience.
Can I add one thing that didn't work?
Oh, okay.
This is kind of a tricky, it kind of mostly worked. Our social and content team this cycle, people that produced videos for us, produced social media, they were on the road all the time. Their stat here is they went to 44 cities and they traveled 125,000 miles, talking to voters, putting out stories, putting out like really, really rich videos, and they did such a good job of developing relationships and trust with these people. Like an example we talk about is we interviewed some Harley-Davidson employees in Missouri who got laid off because, various Trump economic policies. And our video team, I don't think any of these people had voted Democrat ever. So to establish the trust with them to actually talk to us and engage with us. But also, like, our video team, they still talk to these people. Like, they'll get a text from them now and then where it's like, I have a final interview at a different job. And, like, I'm very proud of the fact that, like, we established that relationships and trust with people. So the reason I'm spinning this as a thing that we can do better is I think we have the heart part of this locked down. Like, we're telling really interesting stories. We're making connections with people. But we need to figure out the head part of this now in terms of like thinking about how we apply some analytical rigor to distributing these stories, or when we're talking to the Harley-Davidson worker, thinking not just like, is this a good story to tell, but also like, what is the application of how can we cut this such that, it's a quick 15-second bit, or how are we using this in online ads, or is there a type of community? So I'm really interested in doing some more work to build up our audience development capacities. And
you wrap with a final question asking about going into the next cycle, what do you envy that the RNC has that you don't have?
Setting precedent. No, and to speak about this not in like ideological terms, but just from a basic perspective, Donald Trump is a remarkable grassroots fundraiser. The RNC has done a good job working with the Trump campaign to establish a very us versus them type of strategy. Having done, I've worked at the DNC when we've had a sitting president who is very popular among our base, and when we have not, it is easier when you have a popular Democratic president. People respond to Barack Obama more. You have to get more creative otherwise.
Patrick Stevenson, thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to move over to the RNC, and I want to bring up our editor-in-chief, Joe Mandese, who leads the charge on all content at MediaPost, has been covering advertising in the agency world for 30 years, and Doug Hochberg, who is Patrick's counterpart at the RNC and was with us last year to tell us about the plans they had there. Please welcome Joe and Doug.
Thank you, Steve, and that was a great, actually, primer for this discussion. So, I was going to start by asking you, what do you think is the next new thing? But maybe it would be a good idea if we reacted a little bit to what Patrick said. And he did identify something we talked about earlier on and said that they've been somewhat successful with it in the DNC, which is the use of SMS and peer-to-peer marketing. Can you talk a little bit about that and how you see it playing out?
Sure. So, peer-to-peer is no surprise, I think, to anybody in this room that it was where a lot of money got spent and got spent late this cycle, especially because we have, I think, previous conversations from Chairman Steele. There is so much more data on individuals. You can create the click farm of people just sending out messages who aren't directly on your list, but you can use your internal first-party data to know who you're targeting a lot better. So it is, from our perspective, an ROI perspective in terms of GOTV and fundraising, it was one of our best sources, hands down.
So how do you get the list, though? People are on cell phones these days. It's a little harder to get phone numbers and things. How do you activate it?
Yeah, it's not inexpensive to start a program the size that we were running by the end of 2018. But it did start years ago at the RNC when we started investing hundreds of millions of dollars into our own data. So we were starting at a place of having a lot of information for cell phones. If you go to GOP.com, you can, over the past 2 years, most people don't realize it, but you may have seen a change where we're asking for your cell phone number now, and at the bottom there's a disclaimer saying we can text you. So we have that on our house list. For P2P, you just spend a lot of money and buy. Okay. There's brokers who make that available to you.
Are there other peer-to-peer platforms that you're seeing used this way? For example, DM messaging on social platforms, WhatsApp. There's a lot of ways that people can talk to other people. Yes,
and I think that's going to start to explode even more so because what we're going to start to see is the same thing that you see with, and I don't know if it's going to be this cycle or next, but with spam calling and with emails where it's effective but to a point where you have to email more and more to get people's attention because they ignore so many emails in their inbox, with telemarketing where people ignore phone calls and hang up so quickly you've got to call more and more. The idea of reaching somebody at a text message, although we know they're going to read it more because people hate to have that one open text message on their phone, we know that eventually at some point it's going to start decreasing and people are going to start to look at WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, any automated bot you can put through that, because it's probably going to be less expensive in the end also if you're getting returns off Facebook Messenger from a bot than it is to pay an individual to literally sit there and just click all day while they're watching Netflix, because that's how you have to do it for peer-to-peer. It can't be an automated system.
So Patrick talked a little bit about how they were using that for fundraising. Is it possible to use it for messaging, for canvassing, for getting people out to vote, other mechanisms?
Yeah, absolutely. We're using it for both. For fundraising, the great thing about fundraising with peer-to-peer is you can see a direct ROI very quickly from it. For GOTV as well, how we were running it is you'd run it to, and last year I talked about vote.gop, our landing page, but we were running it to a landing page and then would bounce against UTM codes and figure out where our traffic was coming from, and we could see conversions based on who was getting a peer-to-peer message and from what outlet and from what list they were coming from. So it is undoubtedly a successful tactic for GOTV as long as you're providing useful information. You know, I think the next step is something that's similar to what the screen that Patrick had up, where it's gave, and I actually think the DNC had this on their peer-to-peer because I was getting a few of them, but where you can reply and say, I live in this zip code, where can I volunteer, where can I go vote, and it gives you hours and locations. Easier for volunteer stuff than vote, especially pre-election day voting, because there's so many special instructions you have to give to people. But on election day, hours, location, based on your address that you just text back, as long as you're giving somebody a useful piece of information, they're going to want to interact with a bot and figure out where are they voting. Most people find that a better use than looking at the mailer that they're probably missing in their inbox at home. So are you detecting as much activism and volunteerism to participate in that process on the Republican side? Yes, yeah. I'll say I don't think it's a surprise to anybody. Democrats were a lot more enthused this cycle. We saw it by the end of it. But as far as using a tactic like this, and you know, I know our side gets a little bit of a bad rap for being not wanting to interact with new technologies as much. We didn't see that at all. People were very happy to send us money through peer-to-peer text. They're very happy to look up their polling locations, to sign up to volunteer, any and all of the above. So I don't want this to be a reaction panel, but we are coming off of some things Patrick said, and one of the things that struck me was his description on the level of sophistication of the voters for over a 4-year period that he's observed. I asked Michael Steele earlier if he saw a shift to cynicism, and I think the way he described it, it's the opposite. People are activated. They're out there. What's your view on it? Are people more sophisticated, more involved, or are they tuning out? I think they're involved on what they want to be involved on, and they're tuning out a lot of other things. I don't know if people became more sophisticated in how they look at politics. I think that there is just so much more information hitting them nowadays, and you know, to DNC's credit, they did a great job of making local candidates national issues. You know, you couldn't go anywhere in Ohio and not know who Beto O'Rourke was, but most people in Ohio could care less what was going on in a Texas Senate race. And to that point, does enable better fundraising if you are able to draw in money that's not just from, and California, New York, Florida, outside, and Texas really is the outside states that we all are looking to get money from for other candidates. But if you're pulling incremental amounts from all the other states, it definitely can help. But I think just the amount of information people can get now and the amount that's on TV more, in their Facebook feed, on Twitter, that has raised the level of interest in politics. I think to Chairman Steele's point on the cynicism and how people are looking a lot more, there's, to use Beto again, live streaming his dental surgery, that people want real content now. That there is, I definitely believe there is a tuning out of the traditional TV ad that shows the candidate and their family and, to Chairman Steele's, and the dog that's with them. They want to know a little bit more about their candidates, and by doing these short, quick videos about who they are, what's going on in their day, an issue that popped up that matters to them, or even as some candidates did, a kind of a staged real moment where they know a question's going to appear at a town and magically they have a perfect sound recording and video of that to put out as an organic video. That type of footage is going to become more and more prevalent. People are going to start to use that more. You can get more of that out. It's a lot less expensive. It doesn't cost you $10,000 to produce one of those. You're doing a town hall every week and you can get different answers every time. So I think that's way more of where people are going to be wanting to get information about their candidates from.
Definitely creates authenticity, but I'm hoping the next one's not a colonoscopy.
I think we already had that live on TV once.
By a candidate?
No, I forget what.
Katie Couric, yeah, good one, thank you. So I was going to ask you, is social media done? But these are examples, whether it's AOC's college dancing video being circulated or Beto's hygiene. It's still a hot medium.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, regardless of what platform on social media people are on, there is a social media platform that people prefer to go to. And candidates, as well as any company, are always going to be chasing whatever platform people go to naturally. And right for 16, it was Facebook. That was the dominant platform, and it worked to run ads to that. I think that's dying off a little bit. No one really runs ads on Twitter at this point, even though there's so many people on it. And as I said, I don't think it matters what platform it's on. There will be a social network that candidates are trying to tap into.
So how do you combine the activation at a peer-to-peer level with social media? I mean, obviously people have always shared content with others, but is there a new way to execute or activate that?
To be honest, that's the one thing that I'm always jealous of the Democrats of as a Republican. We don't like sharing, for the most part, what we do to volunteer for candidates as much. We're a lot quieter online just naturally about it, and it's a lot harder for us to convince people when they go to volunteer, that next click of tell all your friends that you're volunteering for this and invite all of them. They'd actually, to the peer-to-peer point and to texting, our people would actually much rather look through their phone book and select 20 friends of theirs and send it to them and say, hey, I'm doing this next week, instead of posting on their Facebook page. And that's a big difference in what we see of how to mobilize people. But at the same time, if they can pull in 20 of their friends, that's still great for us.
But I'd still like to ask you the same question I asked Mr. Steele, which is, given all that's happened in the last 2 years, do you think people have become inured, that they're so baked in right now, skeptical, that they've closed off?
I don't know how you couldn't close off a little bit, to be honest, at this point, especially what's going on with the shutdown. People have to be, at this point, a little tired, at least a little tired.
How do you get around that?
I think authenticity, and at the candidate level. As I said, the RNC had a great advantage in the fundraising piece of it, which is when you have a sitting president and he asks you to do something, you do it. DNC saw this with President Obama. We get the benefit now with President Trump. for volunteers and to get that, they have to believe in what they're doing a lot more than I think they used to. It used to be oh, I'll go out and volunteer for my party. I've been a member of the Republican or Democratic Party for the past 20 years, and I haven't knocked doors this season, and I've always done it, and I'll go knock a few doors a weekend. I think people really have to believe a lot more in why they're doing something, and that goes to good candidates at a local level.
Okay, I think we have time for some audience questions. If we get a mic to Joe here.
Yes, hi. Thank you. Hi, I'm just wondering about, everybody's been talking about data. You mentioned data. Oh, Joe Turo, Annenberg School for Communication. And I'm curious about this. Let's say a national law were passed about data, saying that companies can't collect the kinds of data people have been talking about. Do you think that the political campaigners could claim First Amendment rights and feel that they don't have to abide by that? Or is it an issue that has to be, that commercial and political marketers are in the same boat?
So I'll start off with, I never went to law school, so I cannot answer if it's going to be a First Amendment issue or how that would ever work on a level in the courts. I have no clue on that. If an EU type law were to come in here, I don't know court challenges and how we would go around that. But as far as a marketing perspective, if you're an individual candidate, it's funny, I was actually just in Germany where they have a very similar law where the party cannot maintain a database of voters. So they can't do what the RNC has been doing for the past 7 years. But what they can do is they can go onto Google and they can go onto Facebook directly and they can choose targeted audiences, and you start to whittle down your targeted audiences based on different pages that they view. I mean, to be honest, Google's affinity audiences are actually pretty good, and we saw that for us. We actually saw huge dividends of just using an affinity audience and lookalikes. So I think that there's always going to be a way around using it. You just see less first-party data. I think that's the biggest difference, is you wouldn't have a massive database at the RNC where we're targeting the individuals that we know. We'd be just dependent on the social networks, whatever the biggest ones are at the time, and behemoths of tech companies to tell us who to target.
But no one's, in your knowledge, discussed that, whether it's a First Amendment right for you to collect data.
I try to stay out of our lawyers' offices as much as possible.
Okay.
Yeah, our policy lead, Wendy Davis, who covers this stuff for us, says people in the community feel that PII or first-party data is irrelevant because you can now associate so much information with people. You know who they are without knowing who they are. Do you feel that way?
Yeah, and to your point, yeah, I don't care what your first and last name is if I have 80 other columns of information on you that I know how you're going to vote. If I can check, it helps us to check you off a list and verify that you went through our website, and then we can see if a program that we did worked. That helps us. Then it confirms what we're doing. It informs what we're going to do next cycle. But in a practical sense, on election day, that matters not nearly as much.
So where is the line, and maybe this is a good wrap up if we're running out of time, but of what is the next new data we can exploit? Joe was mentioning he's looking at voice analysis data. Now, I think you can actually tell if someone's lying. We reported today how the FCC is turning a blind eye to location data. We now are at a point where I can know your latitude and longitude that you're sitting right here in the Hyatt based on commercially available data. Is this good? Do we need to constrain this in any way?
I think it does need to be constrained at some point, and this is the personal part of me, not the marketer. As a marketer, please give me every bit of information I can use and put restraints on it. But at some point, people are going to be angered, and I think you see this every time there's a tech hearing on the Hill. People get angry and angry about their information being shared. Our generation, I think, kind of has made a deal with the tech companies. You provide me with a certain service, and I'll give you my data. What we're starting to find out is now, without even providing the service that we thought we were getting, the data is being shared. So where it once was a quid pro quo on, You know, if I sign up for Facebook and I do all these apps and, you know, you tell me how much I need to walk every day and how many steps I'm walking, sure, you can sell that to Wendy's and tell them how many times I walked into Wendy's on my, I guess that's not good for a health app, but you can do that. Now, since it's being traded so many times over and over again, that backlash is going to start to happen way more. I just don't know how you peel it back at this point.
Hey, if it was good enough for Clemens